Prussian Union. And it says, it doesn't matter what you believe, you're all together anyway. And they say, Stefan was the leader. And and they leave on 4 of these, actually 5 of these ships, but one is lost at sea. So the rest of them come and they sail across the Atlantic into New Orleans, of all places. They go around Florida and come up into New Orleans, and then they disembark and they get on flatboats and they sail up the river, the Mississippi River. They come all the way to St. Louis. And then they said they look around and they see everything, and then they get back on their boats and they go back south about 90 miles to, they bought land, and so there's nothing there at all. And they establish several little villages in what's called Perry County, Missouri. Wittenberg is one of them. Frona is one of them. And I think there might have been Marburg was one of them or something. So they have these little villages, and there's probably one church there, but they also end up starting a church up in St. Louis called Trinity Lutheran Church. So Martin Stephan is the leader. He's actually called a bishop. And about a year later, 1839, they're planting their crops, they're starting their farms, they're building their churches, and they're teaching their children in school. C.F.W. Walther, who is one of the pastors that came over, was a student of Martin Stephan. He's a pastor in St. Louis. He actually starts a congregation up in St. Louis. And so on Pentecost Sunday, at it's called Trinity Lutheran Church. If you've ever been to St. Louis, it's in the Soulard neighborhood now. It's right off the banks of the Mississippi. And 4 women apparently come into his office and says, we've been having an affair with Martin Stephan, whose wife is back home in Germany. She didn't come with. Yeah, so make a long story short, he's fired. Stephan is removed from leadership, and he's exiled. He says, you can't live here anymore. So they put him in a rowboat, and they row him across the river and exile him to Illinois. The legend is that he had to face Illinois in the boat, and the people rowing him over had to face Missouri, and neither one of them were supposed to turn around. And so they leave him off. They let him off on the shore on the Illinois side of the river. He ends up starting his own church. He has children, and Martin Stephan Jr. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but he ends up going north after he becomes ordained pastor years later. Some 25 years later, and he ends up starting a church in Mayville, Wisconsin, and it was on the banks of the Rock River. So it was called Emmanuel Lutheran Church, but everyone called it River Church because it was on the river. I was a pastor at St. John's in Mayville, Wisconsin, which was a daughter congregation of this church. But Martin Stephan Jr. was the first pastor of that church, so that's how I knew about it. So Walther is a young pastor, and he's elected leader of the colony in Perry County and in St. Louis. And part of his duties, not only does he preach and teach as the pastor, he starts what's called Luther College and the Altenburg Seminary to train up more pastors in Perry County, Missouri. A couple years later, 1841 to 42, back in Germany, a man by the name of Wilhelm Lehe, L-O-E-H-E, Lehe. He is a pastor in Neuendettelsau, Bavaria. So he's not a Saxon, he's a Bavarian. And there's apparently a difference. I don't know what it is, but they like to, they make sure they let us know there is a difference. He begins to raise funds to train missionaries and pastor missionaries and send them to the United States. It has nothing to do with the Missouri Synod at this point, but in August of 1842, August 5th, actually, he sends 2 of what will eventually be 80 missionaries who will establish congregations, Lutheran churches in Ohio, in Michigan, and Indiana. He's not starting them in Missouri because there are already Lutherans there. And he knows about them. And he's, you do you, we'll do up here, okay, in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. And these are known as laymen. They're trained by laya, so they're trained to be pastors, and so they call them laymen. And they established congregations in 1845 in what would become known as Frankenmuth, Frankentrost, Frankenlust, and Frankenhilf. That's the Frankenmuth is the pride of the Franconians because Bavaria is in Franconia, Germany. Frankentrost is the trust of the Franconians. Frankenlust is the love of the Franconians, or the desire, the passion of the Franconians, and Frankenhilf is the help of the Franconians. So these are these little towns, okay? And their mission not only is to start a Lutheran church there, but also to bring the gospel to the Ojibwe and Ottawa Native Americans in the area. So they start translating Luther's Small Catechism and the Bible into, it's basically the Algonquin language, but that's what most of the Native Americans in that part of the world were speaking, some form of Algonquin language, but specifically to the Ojibwe and Ottawa Native Americans in Michigan. You can go to Frankenmuth today and hear the story. St. Lawrence Church is the Lutheran church in Frankenmuth. It's a beautiful little town. It's a wonderful. If you don't have your honeymoon set, that's a good place to go to. This is where Bethany Ferguson is from. That's her hometown. Yeah, she's from. Yep, they got married at St. Lawrence, right? It's one of the biggest churches in the Missouri Synod. So. And they got married in the original church, the traditional church. They also have a contemporary auditorium as well, and a big school. So that's that. Now, in April and May, so April 26th to May 6th, in 1847, that's where we are at. Yeah, I don't change slides just yet. Leah has been in contact with Walther. And we've got enough churches and schools in our area, we can get together and we can do things that it'll be easier and more efficient if we do things together than each of us trying to do our own thing, especially missionaries, but also establishing higher education schools, high schools, and then colleges. And so they've been talking back and forth. And all the churches that the laymen have established, all the churches that the Saxons in Perry County and St. Louis have been establishing, get together. Strangely enough, they meet in Chicago. I guess it's centrally located. It makes sense when you think about it. 1847, all roads lead to Chicago. It's the railroad hub of the country, and so they meet in Chicago at a church called St. Paul's Lutheran Church. And there are 12 pastors that have gotten together that represent 14 congregations. 2 of them serve two congregations. And they meet at what's called, actually it's not known as St. Paul's back then, it's known as the German Evangelical Lutheran Church of Chicago. It would later become known as First St. Paul's. And they form a synod. Synod is I think it's a Latin word that means walking together. So they're going to walk together in this mission and ministry. And they come up with the name called the German Evangelical Lutheran Synod of Missouri, Ohio, and other states. Of course, it's German, so it actually is die Deutsche Evangelisch-Lutherische Synode von Missouri, Ohio, anderen Staaten. And they elect C.F.W. Walther as the first president of this new synod. The laymen transfer ownership of their churches and schools to this new Missouri Synod. That's what it's known as in short. And they have a seminary in St. Louis and a college, and they have now a seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so now we're off and running. And this seminary in Altenburg is moved to St. Louis, and it was called the Altenburg Seminary, and it's renamed Concordia Seminary. And they changed the name of the seminary in Fort Wayne to Concordia as well. To differentiate the two, the St. Louis is known as Concordia Seminary. The one in Fort Wayne is Concordia Theological Seminary. It's just the way to note them. Okay. That, my friends, is C.F.W. Walther. That is a picture of him. I believe it's a drawing, but it's taken from a photograph of him. He, hmm? Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, he had quite the dome on him, didn't he? Nice long hair, and you can't really see it in this picture, but the darkness under here, that's hair. He didn't have a mustache or hair up here, but he had hair all the way into his chest. It was just all one big mat of hair.
And it's like a very sophisticated layering from the Three Stooges.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and he is known actually in both within the Missouri Synod, but also amongst other Lutherans that aren't Missouri Synod as the American Luther. That's how prolific he was, writing as well as preaching. And so he's really the reason there is a conservative, or what we call confessional Lutheran church body in America. This is the guy. He's trained up a lot of pastors because he serves from 1847 basically all the way to the end of the 19th century. The other picture there is the plaque of the Teachers College that was started in 1864 in Addison, Illinois. I'll get to that in a second. All right, so taking you through the 19th century first. History of the Missouri Synod. I got you some highlights. In 1854, so 47 were formed. So that's 8 years later. Rapid growth. Synod is divided now. It's got so many congregations and schools that it's divided into 4 administrative districts: the central, the eastern, the northern, and the western. Makes sense? And they decide they're going to meet in convention every 3 years. So we're going to get together after every 3 years. We're going to gather together. And the way they're going to do it is you're going to have a pastor who gets to vote and a layperson who gets to vote from each congregation at that point. We changed that, we altered that just a little bit. It becomes a circuit of congregations send both a pastoral and a lay voter to decide on things. Are we going to open a school here? Are we going to raise money here? Are we going to send missionaries here? Are we going to be in fellowship with other Lutheran churches around the world? Things like that. From the very beginning, the Missouri Synod decided it wasn't going to be the pastors who run the synod. It will be a pastoral vote and a lay vote. So it's very much a congregational in polity, it's called. So, and that's somewhat unique, although it is very American to have a vote, right? So that's why we do it that way. They don't do this in Germany. They do this here in the United States, and we still do it today. In fact, this is the year that we have our convention. I'll talk about that later. 1861, there was this little dust-up that started at Fort Sumter and ended up involving the United States, called the American Civil War. The seminary in Fort Wayne, Walther moves them to St. Louis because they share the campus. So there's actually 2 seminaries sharing the campus in St. Louis. They have their own teachers, own students. They were avoiding, this is why Walther did it. Indiana had a draft for the Civil War, and Walther didn't want his students drafted into the Army. They could volunteer, but he didn't want them involuntarily drafted to serve in the Army because they needed pastors. They were desperately needed pastors. So he moves the seminary to Missouri. Missouri doesn't have a draft. Missouri actually isn't even a northern state. It's a slave state. But very early on, it was liberated from the Confederacy. And so they do have them in St. Louis until 1875, when there are just too many professors, too many teachers. They got to move them. So they move them, but they don't move them back to Fort Wayne. They move them to Springfield, Illinois. They want to keep them kind of close, I guess. But in Fort Wayne is also a senior college at that point. So they're already using the facility there. The junior college is in Milwaukee. You go your first 2 years for your undergraduate, and then you do your last 2 years at Fort Wayne, and then you go to the seminary, or you go out and become whatever it is you were going to become. But most of those are pastoral students and teachers. The teacher seminary in Fort Wayne, they keep it as a but the training as a college, but the teachers college that was there, they moved that to Addison, Illinois in 1864. They rename it Concordia Teachers College, and then by 1913, as we'll talk about, I'm just looking to see. I don't talk about it, but they moved from Addison, that's south, I guess, south and west, right? They moved them to River Forest, Illinois, which is Oak Park. It's right to the south of Oak Park, Illinois, basically Chicago. Okay, 1864, 1872. Okay, Synod has grown by this point. Remember, they started in 1847. 1872, there's 543 congregations, starting with 12. They now have 543. Starting with 14 pastors, they now have 415 pastors in 1872. 1882, 1892, 1897, 25 years later, the Synod has grown to 1,564 congregations, 1,986 pastors, 687,000 baptized members. The Synod is just leaps and bounds starting to grow. And this is all because they proclaim the gospel and they teach children about Jesus, and their churches are growing and growing and growing. So 1897, 687,000 members, 1,500 congregations, 1,900 pastors. All right, so that brings us to the 20th century. First years, 1900 to 1913, this is when we decide, hey, we need to bring the gospel to other places. Just as we had started bringing them to the Native Americans, we're going to expand. So the Synod decides to expand mission outreach to Brazil, Argentina, Cuba, India, and China, all in the first 13 years of the 20th century. So we've got missionaries going all over the place with the gospel. And not that there wasn't missionaries before that, obviously there were, but now they're Lutheran missionaries going and bringing the gospel to those places. 1917, obviously you had America entering the First World War. Remember who America was fighting against? Germany. So the word German is dropped from the name of the Synod. Gee, I wonder why. Also, the Synod had incurred some debt by this point. They had borrowed money to build, a new campus in St. Louis and churches and things like that and other schools. So a organization is formed called the Lutheran Laymen's League. Do I have any of this in yours? No, I just have pictures. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm following along if you have it. Okay. So they established what's called the Lutheran Laymen's League. So it's not pastors. It's just ordinary, everyday. This is the men's group. There will be a women's group that is also formed, but this is the men's group. And simply, they formed because the Synod had a debt of $100,000. And so they wanted to raise that money. And so they did. In fact, they did it so well, they raised $2.7 million. So they paid off that debt and then some. And so what they established was a pension fund for the pastors and teachers of the Synod. Because remember, at this point in history, there is no Social Security system. So what are you going to do when you retire, if and when you retire? And so they established a pension fund for the pastors and teachers of the Synod. 1922, the Synod has grown to 3,000 pastors and 1.04 million members. That's a lot of people. In 1923, the Synod starts a radio station with the help of the Lutheran Laymen's League. And this station is established, it's granted the call letters KFUO by the FCC. And it is KFUO St. Louis, Missouri. That's its official legal FCC name, still is. And starts broadcasting in the attic of the seminary by a guy by the name of Walter A. Meyer. And the aerials are actually strung in the attic of the seminary, and then he has a microphone, and that's what they broadcast. But you got to remember, there's maybe 6 radio stations nationwide at this point, so you don't need much of a transmitter to get around the country. On a clear night, you could hear KFUO AM because it was an AM transmitter all over, down in Florida on some nights, out in Colorado on some nights, and certainly on the East Coast. West Coast, not so much because of the Rockies. It's hard to get the radio signal over the Rockies, but that's what they do. 1931, Walter A. Meyer decides to start what's known as the Lutheran Hour, and KFUO becomes the station where he broadcasts from. 1935, you can still listen to the Lutheran Hour today at 6:30 on WGN radio every Sunday morning. 1935, the synod has grown to 4,200 congregations, 3,600 pastors, and 1.2 million members. 1947, after the so in that time frame, so you're in between the two world wars. Remember that both world wars, they fought against Germany. English starts to become a prominent language in the Missouri Synod. In fact, they will bring in the English Synod of Lutherans to be a part of the Missouri Synod, and they then become the English district, and they're roughly half the membership of the Missouri Synod. So half speak German, half speak English. And so you're going to have to get pastors to learn some English, because they were only taught in German at the seminaries. So they were also being taught, if they needed to be taught English. Some of them already knew it, of course. Then they had to be taught German. But you start to see more and more churches in the Missouri Synod preaching and teaching and worshiping in English. Mostly that was because, especially during World War I, the German congregations were looked at a little suspiciously. So the story is told, pastor in Iowa, I don't remember the name, might have been Cedar Rapids, somewhere in Iowa. He's preaching. It's during World War I, and he's preaching in German on the text, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God's what is God. He's basically preaching a patriotic sermon. We need to support the American war effort as an American church. We certainly don't advocate killing of people, right? But we need to support the men and women who are going overseas. That's what he's doing. And you do this by rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. Unfortunately, in German, the word Caesar is Kaiser. Oops. The sheriff was in attendance, and all he hears is, we must surrender under Kaiser. And so he thinks this is a German sympathetic congregation. And so he arrests the pastor.
Oh, no.
And the pastor is in jail for 2 weeks before someone finally thinks that we should probably tell him what Kaiser means in English. But that's the story that's told. But to avoid that later on, they start to worship in English now. And we're starting to see that more and more. By 1935, obviously Nazi Germany has come into its fruition. 1936 will be officially established, right? And so the synod is growing, and they're starting to think, we really need to drop German from the name. We also need to start preaching in English. And so they do. Again, 1.2 million members. 1947, so after the war, and so this is 150 years, this is our 100th anniversary of the synod's founding. They officially changed the name of the German Evangelical Lutheran Church, even though they dropped German already, of Missouri, Ohio, and other states to simply Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Okay, because its headquarters is in St. Louis, Missouri. That's why they keep Missouri in the name. And in 1950, the synod has grown to 4,400 congregations, 4,600 pastors, and 1.6 million members. Okay. A lot of churches in the 1950s then stop preaching and leading worship in German. This church did. I think 1953 was the last year we had German services. I forget. I think I have it in my notes, so we'll get to that. But we did have German language services in addition to English language services well after World War II. 1952, we branch out from radio to TV. This is the Life. It's a television series that's produced and distributed by the Synod. It premieres and it runs until 1988. A lot of actors get their start on This Is the Life. Leonard Nimoy, Jack Nicholson. That was his first paying job. All started on This Is the Life. And you can still watch it. It's on YouTube. You can still watch This Is the Life on YouTube. 1960, the Synod has grown to 5,200 congregations, 5,500 pastors, and 2.3 million members. 1970, Synod grows to 5,690 congregations, 6,866 pastors, and 2.788 million members. This will be the largest we are ever, okay? In all three categories, okay? I take that back. No, yes, in all three categories. So that's the largest group of baptized members that we'll have, 2,788,536. 1974, This is the dark days of the Missouri Synod. So we're at the seminary in St. Louis, my alma mater, by the way. I believe it was in November of that year. It was cold. I remember that, seeing pictures and people are in their coats and stuff. Most of the faculty and the students walk out in protest because their president was fired by the synod. And he was fired for, the official charge was teaching false doctrine. There's a whole big, this is a whole lesson in and of itself. So you can look this up if you want. The Wikipedia article's relatively decent about this. Has a lot of good facts, and there's other books that you can find about the walkout and Seminex. They do form their own seminary. They leave Concordia Seminary, these professors and most of the students, and they form what's called Concordia Seminary in exile. Okay, we refer to it now as Seminex, and the president of the seminary was suspended and then fired by the board of control or the board of directors of the seminary. That board is actually elected by the synod in convention. So there's a handful of students and 2 professors left. So so the seminary gets really, really small. Fort Wayne's doing fine, and they never taught the same way. So they're doing fine, but the seminary in St. Louis needs to be rebuilt. The 2 professors left are Horace Hummel, and Ralph Bowman. Those are the 2 left. And they start bringing in guys back in. Walter A. Meyer Jr., these people like this start to come back in from the parishes who have advanced degrees, and they come back to teach. So that's in 74. In 76, the synod meets in convention. And at that convention, it's made official. The district presidents who were saying, even though they graduated from seminary in exile, we're going to go ahead and certify those guys and they can be pastors in the Missouri Synod. The president of the synod said, no, you can't do that. That is against our constitution as a synod. And so he removes them from their positions as district presidents. There was maybe a dozen, I forget the exact number of the 35. And in protest at the convention, 250 congregations leave the synod, and they take with them 100,000 members. But remember, we have 5,600 congregations and 2.7 million members, so it's not that many, statistically speaking. But we don't like to see anybody leave, so we're saddened by this. But they do form, they form their own little group. I believe, I could get this wrong, so don't come after me if I'm wrong. I believe they formed the AELC, the American Evangelical Lutheran Church, which will last 5 years. Well, what they do, and what I'm saying is that they're in talks with the Lutheran Church in America and the American Lutheran Church, and they form together to form the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the ELCA. So that's the group that forms out of them. And their main seminary, even though they have Concordia Seminary in exile in St. Louis, they become the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago. So you've heard of the ELCA. Didn't you go to Carthage? That's an ELCA school, yeah. So is Valparaiso University, by the way.
I was telling Pastor Ryan, we had a female pastor, and
Yep.
I was shocked. My first thought was, is this legal?
It is an ELCA. Yeah, so a little bit of background to that. We were in fellowship with the LCA and the ALC back in the 60s, as well as the Wisconsin Synod, the WELS, WLS, Wisconsin Synod. Wisconsin said no when we were in fellowship with the ALC, because the ALC in their convention decided we're going to let women vote in our congregations. And the Missouri Synod said, okay. And the Missouri Synod started to look at it and says, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And the Wisconsin said, yeah, there is. So we're no longer part of you. Well, then the ALC decided to go a little bit further and said, oh, women can not only vote, they can be pastors. And that's when Missouri said, time out. No. And so this is why the ELCA has women pastors. is because the ALC brought it in with them. And the LCA said, why not? We don't care. And the ALC said, we don't care. So on and on. And there's other differences as well, but that's one of the things. So interestingly enough, the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, they are the largest Lutheran body in America. But it took 3 church bodies to form together to get them there. They're not that much bigger than the Missouri Synod, but we are not with anybody. So we're kind of homegrown, and they're just merging together, and they are dropping members left and right now. You're seeing this more and more. Women pastors, yeah, okay. Homosexual pastors, transgender pastors, yeah, okay. And it's like, yeah. So people are leaving them in droves as well. And some of them are coming back home to Missouri. Many of them are forming what's the LCMC, I think it's called. It's just another group. So anyway, that's a short synopsis of it. There's a lot more to it than that. Let's see, 1980. Synod numbers 5,600 congregations, 7,900 pastors. So that's bigger than in 1970. But because we lost the 100,000 to the Seminary in Exile group, we're at 2.6 million members. So we're starting to shrink a little bit. Let's take us into the 21st century. Year 2000. The Synod, so this is not history for me. I lived this because I've been a pastor since 1995. Synod has 6,150 congregations. That's a lot. That's more than we've ever had before. We have 8,257 pastors. That's also more than we've ever had before. We're down, though, to 2,554,088 members baptized. The reason for that, however, is not that people are leaving, but that we're having fewer babies. That's the thing. And remember that the zone is saturated. There's a lot of churches. And so we're not going out and getting members. The Missouri Synod at this point grew its own members. It really wasn't saying, hey, why don't you join us? There were some, but not as many as we probably should have. And so we started to work on that in the 80s and said, you know what, we need to go out and talk to people that aren't members of churches anywhere and bring them in. And so that's one mission, forward the mission, I think it was called, to start doing that in the 1980s. Okay. So in 2000, that's the numbers there. 2001, a lot of things happened in 2001, although you guys are too young to remember it.
I was born in 2001.
I know, yeah. Yeah, well, I was a pastor in 2001, and so I had a front row seat to all of that.
Oh, boy.
It was tough. Not only did we have 9/11, obviously, and what was going on there, but that summer, I believe it was in August, don't quote me on that, but it was sometime that summer, the president of the Missouri Synod, the Reverend Dr. Alvin Berry, died. First time in our history, a sitting president died in office. Usually they say, I'm retired, and then they end up dying of old age much later. But Dr. Berry dies while serving as president. So now we have a bit of a crisis. We've never done this before. We don't know what to do with this. So we do name the first vice president becomes the interim president at the time. And so we meet in convention in September of that year. September 7th of 2001. So remember your timeline, okay? So, and I'm there. I was a delegate to that convention. We met in St. Louis, and we didn't know what to do, so we had no sitting president. So the interim president, he has already announced he will not stand for election. So we have a completely new slate of candidates. These guys have never been presidents before. They are district presidents. One of them was, but none of them have served as president or vice president of the synod. They're all coming from the parish or from the district office. And so we elect the Reverend Dr. Gerald, with a G, Kieschnick. But he goes by Jerry with a J. I don't know why, he just does. He's from Texas. And he's been serving parishes in Texas, as well as now he's the district president of Texas. And he is elected on September 8th, 2001. And he's sworn into office that day, that convention. Usually the convention meets in the summertime. And they are installed in office in the fall. But because of the death, we had to wait. So so he's president all of 3 days when 9/11 happens. And now we got another crisis. Got a brand new president. He does have experience, obviously, as district president, but not as a synodical president. What do we do? What does the synod do? So I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'll never forget that day. I was teaching religion that class in our school in Wisconsin, and they always have the news on in the morning, and it was right before school started. And I walk into the room, I'm looking at the news, I'm looking at the Twin Towers, one's on fire and a plane hits the other one. And like, something's going on here. And then we turned it off. But so we started a school day. While that was going on, the towers collapsed. And so I'm at a circuit meeting of other pastors, and we had the radio on at that point. We're trying to figure out, what are we doing now? What are we doing? What's going on? We're just kind of waiting for news, and the towers collapse. I get a phone call from the local radio station. It's like, we don't know what to do. We need you to come down and calm everybody down, because people are panicking, as you might remember. And so I go on the radio that day to talk to everybody and talk about, even though these buildings came down, we're not buildings. We are people, and we will stand tall. And as long as God is, we align ourselves with God, everything is going to be just fine. And if you remember those, that weekend, so that was a Tuesday, remember? By that weekend, obviously everything is shut down. But I think that Saturday, I think it was Saturday, might have been Friday, something was organized in New York called the Prayer for America, and they had it in the Yankee Stadium. And they brought everybody together. They brought a Muslim imam, a Hindu priest, a Jewish rabbi, a Catholic cardinal. The cardinal was there, Archdiocese of New York, and the district president from the Eastern District of the Missouri Synod. And they all just said prayers. That's all they did. We sang songs, they read scripture, and they prayed. And they just prayed that God would forgive us, God would protect us, that God would protect all the people, that were missing at that point, and the dead, and prayed for the people who were grieving. And that's all we did. The next Sunday, I did the same thing in our town. I got all the pastors, everybody together, and we had and what we did was, it's all we did. The choirs of the different churches and sang. Obviously we didn't have there was no mosque, so we didn't have a Muslim, but we did have a Jewish rabbi. And we had all the pastors in our town there. And that's all we did was pray. We sang some songs. We heard scripture. Well, after that, some people in the Missouri Synod had a little problem with the district president getting up and praying with people who weren't Christians. And they brought theological charges against him. Kieschnick had to deal with this as the president of the Synod, which is the first time this has ever happened, and on and on and on. And that was the beginning of a lot of this in the Missouri Synod. You're this, what are we, and on and on and on. And we don't have time to go into all of that, but it was just a very interesting time to live in, very sad time to live. But obviously, we came out of it, and we continue to support and pray for people all over the world. With that, all right, so that was 2001. 2010, just to kind of bring this around, the Synod has 6,100 congregations, 8,900 pastors, and 2.2 million members. So again, we're kind of getting a little smaller. 10 years later in 2020, so this was what, 6 years ago? Yeah, and we really don't, nothing really changed in the Synod, but we had 5,900 congregations, 6,300 pastors, 1.8 million members. But obviously, during the pandemic, we started to deal with other things, and especially online church. Our congregation was uniquely situated than other Missouri Synod congregations, as well as many other Christian churches in the country. We had already built an online presence. We were already streaming our services by that point. And so when March, in fact, it was 6 years ago this weekend, was when the pandemic began, shut us down. Pritzker shut us down. We could not meet. Our last Sunday, it was March 13th was the Sunday that year, I think. No, it was March 15th, that Sunday. It was my birthday. Was the last service. Monday we were shut down. Everybody was shut down. But that Wednesday we had a midweek Lenten services. We were online. And so we just, Pastor Kinney and I did the service. We had our organist here and we just did it online, live. And we never stopped. We never looked back. So, and we continue to do that. So, all right. That's a brief history of the Missouri Synod. Let me show you a little bit about the Missouri Synod. There we are. We're just a bunch of old white guys. That's what that picture shows you. That is the Presidium of the Missouri Synod there. The guy in the middle, who you got a picture in your book too, right? Your handout. He's got this Teddy Roosevelt mustache going on.
Yeah.
That's Matthew Harrison. He's the president of the Synod, and those are the vice presidents of the Synod. And then the graphic there of the United States, that's how the Synod is divided by district. So here's how we're organized. The LCMS, that's the shortened form of Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The LCMS, as a national church body, is organized with a centralized headquarters in St. Louis. Actually, it's in the village of Kirkwood, Missouri. And the building they work in is called, officially, the International Center. Unofficially, it's called the Purple Palace. It's 3 stories, and each story has a different shade of purple carpet. So they call it the Purple Palace. I don't know why. I don't know why they chose purple, but they did. And we have a president and 6 vice presidents, of which you see the picture there. That's actually, this was current of last year. The guy on the far left, right? He's got a purple shirt. So it'd be the far...
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at the far left, right, as the picture, but it's the guy in the purple shirt. He has stepped down. He has cancer, so he's going through chemo and he stepped down. So there's another guy has taken over his place. The guy in the red shirt, I can't remember his name. I wish I could. He is actually he's an immigrant to the United States from Brazil, I believe. But he's a Missouri Synod pastor. But he was the head of the Brazilian Lutheran Church at that time, and now he's a vice president here. I believe that's who that is. So we have a lot of those people in the Missouri Synod. I know there's no African Americans or black people in this picture, but we do have plenty of. One of my best friends is from Detroit, inner city Detroit. He serves in Iowa now, which is really strange for him. He's like 6'8". And the biggest black man you've ever seen off of a basketball court. And he's out in western Iowa, but he's doing a wonderful job. We have several of these. And we actually have, it's not a caucus, but there is, within the Missouri Synod, there is a group that helps with African Americans. We have a long history of reaching out to African Americans. You've heard of Rosa Parks. There's another Rosa, I forget her last name, but she was worked with turn of the century. So this is going to be Stephen Douglas. Is that Frederick Douglass? Frederick Douglass. She's known as the other Rosa. So she was very much involved in getting the right to vote, things like that. Not just in the Missouri Synod, but she was a Missouri Synod Lutheran doing this. And she also, I believe, worked with Dr. King in the 60s. And so we do have a long-standing history. We were abolitionists. Missouri Synod was officially abolitionist. And even though we had congregations in the Confederacy, they were very much abolitionist congregations. And so many Missouri Synod pastors served as chaplains in both the Confederacy and the Union Army during the Civil War and since, reaching out to those soldiers with the gospel. Didn't get involved in the politics other than abolition. Let's see, we have a synodical president. Let's tell you about him a little bit. He is the chief ecclesiastical and ecumenical officer of the Synod. In other words, anything to do with the theology of the church, he's kind of in charge of, Okay, he has to make sure that we follow the scriptures and the Lutheran confessions, and he does. He does that in our, not only in our churches to make sure that the pastors are taught that way and continuing to teach that and preach that way, but the seminaries as well as the colleges, the universities. But he's also what's called the ecumenical officer of the synod. In other words, he represents the synod to other church bodies, and he ends up going to their conventions and giving them, greetings from the Missouri Synod here and around the world. So this is how I wrote it. Supervises what is taught and practiced within the church and advising and maintaining relationships with our partner church bodies. The first vice president is responsible for the colloquy committees for both pastoral ministry and commission ministry. These are people who have the degrees from other places and other church bodies who want to join the Missouri Synod, so they come in colloquy. And so you've gone through all those things. We're going to teach you about Missouri Synod polity, how things work, and then you can become a teacher or a preacher in our church, pastor in our church. He is also an ex officio member of the LCMS Board of Directors. He is a member of the Commission on Theology and Church Relations, and he is the Synod President's representative at the Board of Regents of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, just how it works out. 2nd through 6th vice presidents then represent the geographical regions of the Synod. That's the other graphic there of the United States. And they also serve as parish pastors. So they're pastors in churches as well as being vice presidents. So let's go with the graphic of the country. The Synod is made up of 35 districts. Those are all, those are the regions are in the colors, and then the what look like states, but they make up, some of them multiple states, are the districts. There's 35 of them. 33 of them are regional or geographical. And you see that Illinois is divided into 3: Northern Illinois, Central Illinois, Southern Illinois. Wisconsin also divided into 2, Northern and Southern. Some of them make up multiple states or the whole state, like the South Dakota, North Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska, things like that. The 2 non-geographical districts are the SELC district, which is the Slovak Evangelical Lutheran Church district. They were a synod unto itself. They were their own church body that were made up of Slovakian people, Slovenians. And the English district, which was the English Synod. They were English-speaking Lutherans here in America prior to the Missouri Synod. And so they joined us in that. But they wanted to keep where they were, because they were all over the country. So they did. They're not that big, but they do have their own district president who serves as a pastor, and they got to go all over the place. So let's see, Synod, we did that one. St. Matthew. We are located in the Northern Illinois district. Our district office is located on the campus of Concordia University of Chicago in River Forest. And our district president is the Reverend Dr. Alan Buss, who is a full-time district president, but he is former senior pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Belvedere, Illinois, where he still resides. I tell you that because I've known Alan since I was a sophomore in college. He was a junior in college, or senior. He was a senior in college. We sang in choir director together. So I've known him for a long time. Very good friend of mine. Okay, now this is why you came tonight. The history of St. Matthew Lutheran Church. 1863, October 11th, German immigrant farmers and their families, 23 total, established the Evangelical Lutheran St. Matthew Congregation of the Unaltered Augsburg Confession at Russell's Grove, Lake County, Illinois. Yeah, let's just call them St. Matthew. Right? But that's what they join. They do that. All right. Now, a couple things about that. Evangelical Lutheran, because they were German, that's where they came from Germany. They were the Evangelisch. They weren't Lutherans in Germany. They don't call themselves Lutherans in German. They call them Evangelisch. So that's why it carries over. But in America, you're called Lutheran, so they throw the Lutheran in there. Unaltered Augsburg Confession. Just a little bit of explanation to that. We talked about the Augsburg Confession. We've talked about that previously. It's one of the confessions of the Lutheran Church. And it's the main confession. When you get to America, the General Synod, which is established right around the time the country is established in Pennsylvania, they decide that instead of the original Augsburg Confession that Melanchthon wrote with Luther's blessing back in 1825, they are going to go with the update that Melanchthon made after Luther died. And so it was altered. And it was less, I don't know what he tried to do. I think he tried to make it less in your face with the Catholics thumbing their nose at him type. And that's the way he felt, I guess. So he altered it somewhat. And that was a big no-no. Says, we already had this one. We've already subscribed to this one. We don't want a new one. So, and the General Synod went with the altered one. And so when they came over here, and the Missouri Synod is formed, we're going with the unaltered one. So you will see UAC on a lot of cornerstones in the Missouri Synod. It means the unaltered Augsburg Confession. I don't know what the changes are. I never looked into the history of that. Being that I had to subscribe to the unaltered one, I didn't really care. But other than it has a historical footnote. So that's your homework if you want to find out. So anyway, that's who we are. That's when we were established. That's those pictures are the original sanctuary on the right. And that picture, the three buildings in that picture are the outside of the original sanctuary, all the way on the right. The middle one is the church, is the school, and the home there, the two-story home, is the teacherage. That's where the teacher lives. Okay.
Quick question. What's with the arrow mark?
All right. So the arrow on that. All right. This is an older picture that was altered. That cross it's pointing to was one of the few things saved from the fire. All right, so it was sitting up in the display case. This picture was next to that cross. And so they wanted to say, well, this cross is in that picture. And so this was the cross that was on the door that led you, to get into the pulpit, you had to go behind into the sacristy and up the door, up the steps into that pulpit, okay? So that cross is now at the baptismal font in the church. So we made it into a processional cross, so it's in there. So that's why the arrow is there.
What caused the fire?
Oh, we'll get into that. That's coming up.
All right.
So 1863, October, we're formed, okay? We're meeting actually in Long Grove at the Congregational Church there, served by the pastor at Long Grove because they're Protestant, okay? But they don't want us to join that church. So we're starting our own church, and we're eventually going to move back over to Hawthorne Woods, or well, here anyway. It was Russell's Grove, I should say. So they decide we're going to build a sanctuary and a parsonage for ourselves and then call our own pastor. And so they find the bill for that. They build that first church, and there's a building on the other side of it that's not in that picture. And they get the bill for $2,800. Yeah, it was a lot of money. In fact, they couldn't raise it all. They raised about $1,900 of it themselves. Remember, they're just a bunch of farmers. They don't have a whole lot of money. And there's only 23 members total at that point. But they get word out to the Missouri Synod. And churches as far away as Indiana send in offerings. And they raised it all. And so they got there was no debt incurred, so they built it. And they start worshiping. So the pastor starts teaching children the catechism and other things. Bunch of farm kids, they go out, they milk the cows, they come back for school, and then at the end of the day, they got to go back out and milk the cows and do their chores. So he's teaching on the back porch of the parsonage. So in 1877, they've grown. They figured they're growing enough where we can't do this. We're going to establish a school. So they officially start the Christian Day School. 2 years later, they add a room at the rear of the church. They're no longer on the back porch of the parsonage. They add a room at the rear of the church for $95, and they have 19 students in that first year of 1879. By 1889, the 4 acres surrounding the church are donated to the congregation. They're a bunch of, it was the Welk farm, at least on the western side was the Welk farm. I don't know who was on this side, or Hawthorne Gardens is right now. But this is all farmland. And so 4 acres are, which is the current campus now, are all donated to the congregation. And so they decide they've got the room now, let's build a schoolhouse. So they build a one-room schoolhouse that had room for 100 students. 1893, they call a teacher for the first time. 53 students are enrolled. 1923, they offer worship services in English for the first time after the war, first war. 1931, they remodel that school. And in 1937, they organize a Sunday school. All right, that brings us to the fire. Okay. So I only have one picture in your handout, but I found, we found somebody had died recently and we did the funeral and they were digging out of his house. They were cleaning up and they found these pictures. So I've got several pictures of, that's the original church that was built in 1864 for $2,800. So a fire starts in the steeple. It was electric. There was electric in the church, and it was December 19th. So there was a fire in the steeple, the wiring, and it caught fire, and it just burned it to the ground, as you can see. But somebody took pictures while it was they couldn't get it out, and so it was all wood. So it went boom. The pastor goes inside, he saves what he can, the cross he saves some of the communion ware he's able to save, but that's it. He's not able to save anything else. Everything else burns. The bell that was in the steeple melted down. That's a big hunk of metal up in that case. Some of the stained glass is melted down, and they find that. So that's all up in that display case. So when?
What year?
Oh, what year? This is in 1942, December 21st, actually, not the 19th, I'm sorry, December 21st.
Yeah.
4 days before Christmas, right?
Wow.
Wow.
So this is less than a year since the beginning of World War II. Our entrance into it. Remember, we started December 8th, 1941 was when war was declared. And then Germany, and we fight both war in Germany and Japan by 42. So congregation says, hey, we're going to stay together. We start worshiping in the school, and we're going to build a new sanctuary. Problem is, there's no materials to be had. It's the war, so they have to wait 7 years in order to get materials, and so they do. And in 1949, on June 13th, they dedicate the new sanctuary. Okay. And so that's what they built. Now that it's an L-shaped. If you're looking at that picture it without the L-shaped extension on the side there. That's the original footprint. Okay, a steeple was added a little bit later, but that's the original footprint of that church. So they dedicate this in June of 1949, and we call it the Historic Chapel now because we have a new church, but I'll get to that in a moment. 1952. The Reverend Harold Kruger is called. After 24 years of Pastor Girth. Pastor Girth was the pastor for 24 years during all of this. And he gets the new church built. And then he retires, and Pastor Kruger is called to be the pastor in 1952. He would go on to stay the longest, 48 years. He will stay as senior pastor and senior pastor, full-time pastor of the congregation, but 1952 is when he starts. So, and now we're growing. This is the heyday. Remember, we talked about the growth in the Missouri Synod. St. Matthew sees the same type of growth. 1953, we had 2 classrooms to the school. We had kindergarten to the school. By 1959, we have 182 students in our school, 5 teachers serving them. That's the largest we will ever be. And in addition to the sanctuary, they build that L shape. That's called the overflow seating. So you could actually see into the sanctuary at that time. It's the youth room now, but the wall has been put up, so you can't really see in there. There's just a door into them there. Also in 1959, the original parsonage burned down. It was also made of wood, bad wiring, and so it burns down. And so they build that one. In 1960, I think, the one that's there now. 1959, they also stopped doing German services. Pastor Kruger can speak German, but it's not his native tongue, and there's not enough people that speak German anymore. So they stopped doing German altogether in 1959. That's one of the longest runs of German in the Missouri Synod, by the way. 1964, we build the gym that we have here. And the new school building that's attached to it, not to the back, but there, where the offices are now. That cost $250,000. But so 100 years later, that's how much inflation is, right? 1975, you see that you got the front door there. They expand that out. There's a canopy there now, and so that front door entrance is still there, but that was the expansion of the narthex. In 1989, Pastor Kruger is obviously getting older. And so, and we have grown large enough where we have a second pastor. Carlton Payne is called. And basically, Pastor Kruger says, I got 10 years, get a new pastor in here. And so they serve together for 10 years. 1990, they break ground on the building you're in now. And this takes 2 years to build. They break ground in May of 1990. And in November of 1992, they dedicate this building. And this is what's called the main sanctuary. Yeah. That costs $2 million some dollars, right? And so the church went into debt big time to get that done. 2000 then, so Pastor Kruger gets to use it for 8 years, just under 8 years, 7 years actually, as the full-time pastor. And then in 2000, he says, my work here is done. I'm retiring. He does stay on for 2 more years to get to 50, and then fully retires and moves to. At that point, Pastor Payne is living in the parsonage. Pastor Kruger was living at a home with his son, his wife, and he is living with his son's family in Twin Lakes, Wisconsin. They give him the house, and the son built a new house. So. Anyway, so 2006, so Pastor Kruger's retired. Pastor Payne retires. He has MS, and so he can no longer serve. He can't even walk anymore. And so from 2006 to 2010, we have an interim pastor that's kind of, all right, we need to move out of this. In that time, Pastor Payne dies. Yeah, he succumbed to MS. And so the interim pastor's here, and the congregation really never deals with that death, the retirement of Pastor Kruger and the death of Pastor Payne. We need a new pastor. We need a new pastor. We need a new pastor. And so Pastor Moritz tries to get them through that process. And in the meantime, they're in debt, and they're refinancing their debt, and they're making payments, just interest payments. So the debt's not going anywhere either. So in 2010, they decide, we're going to call a pastor. We need a new pastor in here who's going to lead us out of this. And so Pastor Timothy Kinney is called from the district office in Minnesota. He had served pastors, churches in Wisconsin. And now he was an assistant to the president in Minnesota. He becomes their senior pastor. And then a year later, I come on board as assistant pastor. They retitle me as associate pastor so I could vote in synodical conventions. Long story. Anyway, I'm an associate pastor. So now we're working together, we're growing, and we're looking at, we need to get rid of this debt, okay? So we're going to reorganize the debt, and we're going to put together a capital campaign that will culminate in the 150th anniversary of the congregation in 2013. And so we did that, and we started to get pledges and things like that, and so we started to pay it down, and we did. In 2013, we did. We retired what was at that point a $1.8 million debt in 3 years. And we burned the mortgage on Pentecost Sunday. Not Pentecost Sunday, Ascension Day that year. And then that summer we celebrated that October we celebrated our 150th anniversary. In the summer we had the pig roast. Couldn't do anything else. So, and President Harrison came and preached for us and things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And so we eliminated the debt of the new sanctuary and the gym. We had a debt for that as well. So 2018, we closed the K-8 school. We just didn't have enough kids because enrollment kept going lower and lower and lower. We reorganized as an early childhood center and start to grow again. 3- and 4-year-old preschool program to where it is today, 35, 40, depending on how you count or what days you're looking at. 2019, our early childhood center becomes just the second preschool in the country and the first in our state to receive National Lutheran School accreditation. So we're very happy about that. 2020, obviously, what happened there. But our video and internet technology was updated so that we could extend our ministry worldwide, which we do, streaming all our worship services live, many of our Bible studies live, which we are doing right now, by the way, on YouTube and Facebook, and provide video devotionals and podcasts, which we continue to do to this day. coming out of COVID, Pastor Kinney announces his retirement. So we're back in church in August of that year. And Pastor Kinney announces his retirement. He goes in for his physical. He is diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And so he spends his last year going through chemotherapy. My dad was going through it at the same time, by the way. So I had a front row seat to both of these guys doing this. So I knew exactly what was going on. And then Pastor Kinney's doing fine. He's still going through chemotherapy, but this is now 6 years later. So he retires in 2021. He was here for 10 years, 32 years as a pastor overall, and he moves up to Wisconsin. He's from Wisconsin. He's from Michigan, and he lived in New York for a while, but he's got family up in Wisconsin, so he goes up there to be near grandkids and kids. So I take over as sole pastor. I didn't have a pastor to work with me for 2 years, from 2021 to 2023. And then we call Pastor Ferguson in May of 2023, and he's brought on board in June of 2023 as our associate pastor. And then in 2024, we call Brittany Johnson to be the director of our church ministry, youth and family ministry here at St. Matthew. And then a year later, I should add this in, she takes on deaconess studies. So she's studying to be a deaconess. And so she's an intern as well. That brings us to present day. Okay, on your sheet, you have, you got to turn this landscape mode, this piece of paper. So, yeah, I want to just show you, this is how we are organized as a congregation, okay? We are congregational in polity, which means we have a voters' assembly. Everyone who is 18 years of age and older and is a member of the congregation, so you've gone through this class, you're a communicant member of the congregation, and you are 18, you can then join the voters' assembly. Our Constitution says you got to have attend 2 of them. You can also attend a church council meeting because we only meet twice a year. So it's kind of hard to, we want to get it done as soon as possible. So we also allow you to attend a church council meeting on your second one, and you're officially a member of the voters' assembly. And we make all the decisions. All the financial decisions of the congregation are made by the voters' assembly that involve $5,000 or more. So the voters have to approve that. The budget is approved by the voters. And all the boards are overseen by the voters, and that's the different boards you see below that. The voters' assembly is represented monthly by the church council, by a chairperson, a vice chairperson, because we allow women to be chairpersons of the congregation, which is somewhat new in the Missouri Synod, only in the last 10 or 15 years. That's relatively new, so I got to reorientate how I talk about this. So we have a chairperson, a vice chairperson. We also have the treasurer of the congregation and the financial secretary of the congregation. That is the voters of the church council, including the chairperson, the chairman of the board of deacons, and then the chairperson of the board of Christian education, the board of outreach and parish life, the board of stewardship and finance, and the board of trustees. Church council can also convene different committees, like the nominations committee to fill the boards, the compensation review committee that puts together how much should we pay our workers, and any other ad hoc committee. The OMX committee is an ad hoc committee. It's only got one purpose, and once that purpose is met, it goes away. Okay, so the different boards. There's a board of deacons, and because they have supervision of the pastoral office, and we don't allow women to be pastors in the Missouri Synod, we only allow men to be deacons. Why we call them deacons, I do not know. Every other church that I've ever served in, and most of the churches in the Missouri Synod, they're called elders, but we call them deacons. So we do. And that's a deaconess, different thing. This is where the confusion comes in. In the Missouri Synod, there is an office of deacon and deaconess. They are lay people who are commissioned to do certain things. A deaconess is commissioned for women's ministry and youth ministry. So that's where that comes in, yeah. Which is why I don't like that we call them deacons, because then it confuses people. So they're actually talking about, do we want to change that? Our youngest deacon doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to be known as an elder. It's like, I get it. So the board of deacons nurtures this, is in charge or oversees the nurture to nurture the spiritual growth and welfare of the congregation and all persons serving in mission. And you have the different things that they are, they supervise, okay? The Board of Christian Education, which is made up of 6 members, plan, administer, direct, and supervise all the Christian education programs of the congregation, including the Early Childhood Center. The Board of Outreach and Parish Life, which is 6 members, is a catalyst and resource for Christian fellowship, mission, and outreach. And all the different things that are there. Board of Stewardship and Finance. Manage and finance all financial aspects of the church and the Early Childhood Center. And encourage and maintain an inventory and member talent and commitment cards. That's something that we're asking you to fill out. We will ask you to fill that out. I just remembered, I don't know if I have that here. Oh, because it's online, we do not. Okay, so there is a form to fill out, and it's online. So what are you good at? You know, something that you probably filled out was theater and yeah, and choir. That was one of
Choir, I'm good with children, that stuff.
yeah. So that they're the ones that there's a stewardship committee underneath them. They kind of maintain that, and then the Board of Trustees, which supervise and the maintenance of all. Supervision and maintenance, of all property belonging to the congregation, the physical plant. So, and offsite properties, which we used to have. We used to have a parsonage offsite, which we don't anymore. And we actually we had a piece of land up in Michigan that was left to the congregation. So but they just sold it. So it was the chairperson of the trustees that did that at the direction of the voters' assembly. I think it ended up being $22,000 that we sold it for. So. And that brings us to the end of that. So your next steps for you, application for membership, statistical print, and then we want to talk about the rite of welcoming. So we need to find a date that works for you. We were talking about, if I'm remembering right, not tomorrow. Next Sunday? Does that sound right? Or is it the Sunday after?
Hopefully the Sunday after.
It can be. It doesn't matter. Whatever works for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, originally it was written down as tomorrow, but.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's why I was getting.
So we'll be here this Sunday, we won't be here on Sunday. We'll be back here.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That was the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they want to also organize a reception. That's the Board of Parish Outreach and Parish Services. So we do it at the 8 o'clock service, and then you stay during coffee hour and get all your goodies. Yeah. So we will be in. That's in process. We'll pick a date that works for everybody. And we'll talk to Chris. I got to still talk to Chris about it too, because his whole family's coming into membership. So. Yeah. And then Jeffrey's not, but that's all right too.
I tried.
Hey, no, hey, when you're ready, you're ready. The Holy Spirit will work on you. You can still eat some of the treats.
Okay.
I mean, he's singing in the choir for the evening
Good.
service, so.
Good. Yeah, they're desperate need of tenor voices, I'll tell
I
you that.
know.
I mean, when I first got here, I was singing tenor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, only because I could, and I can't do that anymore. Yeah. Age took my tenor voice away from me. I was never a tenor to begin with, but I had the range for it. Now I can't do it.
That's how I am too. I wanted to be a baritone, but I kept getting shunted into tenor, so I developed a tenor voice.
Yeah. It's kind of like, all women are sopranos, but the one who can sing, who can read notes are altos.
Technically, but Bob would be a piano.
No.
But I still hit the lower notes.
Good.
It's like, hey, if you need an alto, I
Yeah.
can switch.
All right, so we'll work on that, getting a date. For your homework, it's chapter 30, 31, and 32.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your work on. And we're done. A little bit longer than normal, but that's because I yap a lot about the history of the synod. So you should see me do lesson 9 with the Reformation. So I like all that stuff. So, Very good. Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to get to know these people. And also Chris, who's not here tonight. Watch over all of us. Give us safe travel home tonight. Bring us to your house as soon as possible to worship you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night. See, that was fun. We're going to start this again in April.
Okay.
Yeah. We got a few people that want to join. That's always nice. Yeah.